How's everybody doing? It's been a long day, right? Well, thank you so much for being here. My name is Tom Snyder. I lead Riot. We're a local nonprofit organization, and today we're going to dig in a little bit to supply chain. How many folks have started to see recent stories about, like, should I start doing my Christmas shopping now? Like, what's happening? There have been semiconductor shortages. There have been all kinds of supply chain challenges, not only that ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal 6 or 9 months ago, but kind of broader impacts of the fact that our world has been really trying to drive lean processes across all industries and everything being just in time. And when you have a speed bump as big as a pandemic, it can create some challenges. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We call it the world's largest chain as we think about the supply chain, the interconnectedness of everything. But before we dive into that, just real briefly, our organization, Riot, we're headquartered here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're proud that this is our home, but we operate across the United States. We have team in about 6 different states. We run programs that really support entrepreneurship and job creation in the areas of emerging technology. Everyone that's here today in some way is probably connected to the tech sector. That's great. We're excited to have you here. But for many folks, they discover through their life that some folks have a great run in a company for their entire career. Some folks jump company to company, but many people at some level have that entrepreneurial itch. You have that idea that you either want to take forward independently through a new startup company, or that maybe you want to champion from within your organization to create change in your organization. And oftentimes those ideas are rooted on the fact that as technologies evolve, we can solve customer problems in new ways. Our nonprofit is focused on helping to create jobs in kind of emerging technology areas. We started back in 2014 around Internet of Things. In fact, we started as a meetup group. The Raleigh Internet of Things meetup was what Riot was. We grew and became the regional Internet of Things, and now we're operating at a national level, so we're Riot. You can find us at riot.org, but we operate chapters in multiple states. We run equity-free startup accelerator programs, helping entrepreneurs to grow, helping corporate innovation teams to drive new lines of revenue. We actually have a government innovation team that's participating in our program right now, developing out new services for their communities, for the people that live in their communities, as they look at, how can we innovate? So whatever kind of organization you're in, we'd encourage you to reach out, to connect, to either volunteer, to, if you have deep business or technology domain expertise, and you'd like to maybe be a volunteer mentor to a young founder that's starting a new company, we would love to hear from you. If you are a corporation that's interested in maybe participating, we have over 90 sponsors that help us to keep all of our programs 100% free for participants. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're working on some new business, or if you're a mid-career professional that just wants to come out to one of our classes or one of our workshops, we want everything to be completely free and for that to remain so always. And that happens because of folks like the logos that you see on this screen. Tonight, specifically, we have a few sponsors I'd like to call out. Styra does amazing work. If you don't know about some of their programs, please reach out. Are you in the room right now? Some of the Styra folks, they may be downstairs already at their booths, but they are one of the major sponsors of All Things Open, and they're enabling tonight's event to happen and also to be free, including food and beverage. We also have Napino, one of large manufacturing institutions that helps people in particular that have hardware products through their R&D, their distribution, their connected components, and then eventually building out products. DNA Group, right here locally, is oftentimes the crowd favorite sponsor. They're often our beer sponsor. They're also another manufacturing organization in the area that helps with folks that are building hardware products. I know that we're at a software conference, or at least it's thought of that way. Todd, if you heard his closing remarks this evening, said really we're a people conference, and we're also a people organization. The future economy is being driven by data. It's being driven by, thank you, Todd, by real-time use of data. So anything that is happening in the AI, the machine learning space, anything that's involved in blockchain and public ledgers, all these are data technologies, and they're software driven. But data is generated by hardware, by sensors, by devices, and as we're now learning, we're seeing this transition from cloud computing out to the edge because of the latency advantages and things that you heard from Red Hat CTO this morning. We're seeing more and more real-time information, collect data, immediately do something with it, automate solutions. Sometimes we ourselves are the data creators, right, when we're inputting things into our phones or into our computers and other things. But we see the future as a much more close merging of both hardware and software. And so we try and bring all those communities together. And as soon as we're done with a short talk here, I encourage you to go downstairs, see technology demos, learn about this kind of fusion of both hardware and software and IoT and data. It's a whole lot of fun. At 6 o'clock, we're going to roll out the food and the beer that these sponsors are bringing forward. But back to our topic for the evening, supply chain. Everything we can look at in this room came from somewhere, right? The tables, the chairs, the AV equipment, all the food that's up on this slide. This is a Panera slide. You're going to hear a Panera story in a moment. It all comes from somewhere, and it has to get from A to B. And we don't always think about the complex networks of aircraft and shipping and rail and trucking and all these different interconnected things that physically get our stuff from place to place. And the fact that all of this is really driven by software. So this is another hardware and software fusion coming together to create an interconnected system that ideally gets things from place to place, as Amazon would try, within 2-hour delivery, right? How do you develop out these optimizations and efficiencies that whatever you might want at whatever time you think you might want it, it can get there? Well, what happens when all of a sudden you have something like a pandemic that completely disrupts where things are going and why? I'm really excited to hear the story of one of our software partners, Tibco, and how they helped one of their customers to maintain and completely re-engineer through software innovation a supply chain in the midst of the pandemic. And so with that, Jesus Centeno, I'll ask you to come up to the stage and tell your story.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Yep, sounds is good, yeah, okay. That's a really big picture, so let's move on to the next slide. So, hello everyone, my name is Jesus Centeno, and today I'm joined virtually by Noel Niticek, who is Director of Enterprise Services at Panera Bread. Unfortunately, he didn't get clearance to travel and be here with us today, but we'll be hearing the story directly from him on how they basically leverage technology to re-innovate and reinvent their supply chain, basically, right? So as Tom mentioned, I work for a company called Tibco Software. For those of you that are not familiar with the company, we've been in the industry for over 2 decades. We do a lot of data-related things, right? Like, it was interesting to hear Tom saying how everything comes from the data itself, right? So think of Tibco as a way to not just connect to the data, but integrate it, move it, virtualize it, analyze it. So things like analytics, machine learning, MDM, right? Like, those are embedded in our DNA for sure. These next couple of slides are interesting, right? Because oftentimes when you hear the word supply chain, people will think of different things, right? And sometimes it really depends on what world they're coming from, right? Like, is it more like the technical side? Is it more like the business side? Usually it tends to be one or the other one, right? So this first picture is more like what I would think, like someone from the business side would think when they hear supply chain, right? It's the perfect picture where everything works well, everything connects, all the devices talk to each other seamlessly, automatically, right? Like, you can configure it, you can customize it, you can fix it remotely with the tap of a finger from a iPad or a remote device, whatever you are in the world, right? Now, we know that that's hardly ever the case, right? Supply chain it is messy, right? It's very complex. And it gets difficult very quickly as well, right? So when I hear supply chain, this is what comes to my mind, right? A lot of stuff moving all over the place with needs to track it, to optimize it, to revolutionize it in any way possible, right? Now, why would we care about supply chain anyways, right? Like, I mean, Tom made an awesome case for supply chain, and actually, I'm very excited. I live in Austin, so in theory, tomorrow night when I fly back, Home Depot will finally have the door for my home office. So I recently moved houses and I built a home office. I've been waiting for the door for 6 months, kid you not, right? So to the point that, like, yeah, I mean, why we care about supply chain? Because once upon a time, there was a year called 2020. And we all know what happened with that, right? So, I think it was the perfect case for us to realize how big is our dependency on the supply chain, right? Actually, I don't think I ever got to the bottom of this, right? Like, what happened with the toilet paper? Like, where did it go? Like, anyways, it's an interesting story. But, it's clear that, like, we depend largely on the supply chain to get a lot of, like, the products and items and services that we consume on daily basis, right? That they have become part of most of our own existence, right? So that's why we care, right? And we all of us in the technology field, right, we have the responsibility to leverage the best in breed technologies out there, powerful technologies that we have nowadays to make the supply chain the best that it can be, as efficient and as productive and as cost efficient, right, as possible, right? So let's talk about, like, some of the different technologies that can shape the supply chain, right? So number one, blockchain, and social sustainability, right, is top of the mind of a lot of, like, the consumers out there, right? Like, this notion of, I just don't want to buy. I want to know what I'm buying, and I know who I'm buying it from, and where that product has been, and how it was manufacturing, and what were the standards and the policies, and et cetera, that were followed to produce and manufacture that item that I'm thinking of buying, right? And I want to make sure that they stick to my view of the world, right? And so this requirement, right, to understand the lineage, the track and tracing capabilities is becoming more and more common, right? So blockchain is a technology that can definitely be leveraged for those type of scenarios. Now, digital twins as well. Digital twins is a very powerful concept, right, that can be leveraged to bring together the physical and the digital worlds into just an abstraction layer, right, of an entity, right? That entity could end up being pretty much anything, right? Like a person, a process, an institution, data itself, right? Or a supply chain, right? Like, that would be the ultimate digital twin, right? And it really allows us to then run experiments, right? And different scenarios, hypothesize different scenarios on how the different subcomponents of that entity, they correlate and they influence each other, right? So in the case of supply chain, for example, trying to figure out how changes in transportation system are going to affect positively or negatively the overall supply chain, right? So very, very powerful concept. There's also, the idea of contactless payments, right? Like, so with the rise of e-commerce, with the pandemic and other things that are happening in the world, contactless payments are becoming more and more common, right? So blockchain is very well suited to support these type of initiatives. Now, second force, AI and ML, right? So think predictive analytics. How powerful it is, right? Like, the ability to predict what's going to happen, identifying patterns, identifying risks, or potential fluctuations in the market, right? And be better prepared to address those fluctuations. Have a way to run your operations as efficient as possible, meet the demand with the exact supply, consistently, on a consistent basis, right? That's a very powerful concept that definitely can be leveraged. Now, so think of reverse logistics, for example, right? So reverse logistics as, the addition of all the services, right, that especially now with e-commerce, that retailers have to provide to support, the demands of customers, right? So think of returns, refills, reselling, recycling, right? All these value-added activities that happen after, post-sale, basically, points, right? And how technology can support, those type of requirements. Drones, another great example, right? How much ML capabilities drones need really to be functional, Right? I know that there's a big legislation aspect into drones, but from a technical point of view, right, like drones are getting almost ready, right, to become, you know, at pair with other type of transportations in supply chain, right? Especially, you know, when you attach cameras, they can address very, very powerful use cases, right? So from delivery of vaccines in remote locations to track and trace to surveillance, auditing, et cetera, right? You name it, right? So, you know, ML definitely is you know, a major engine that is driving a lot of, you know, innovation in supply chain. All right, the third force, robotics, right? So let's think of, for example, autonomous vehicles, right? So if we think that most of those, you know, items and products that we've been talking about, right, they are delivered by trucks in the end, right, in the supply chain. So think of the impact of now having self-driving trucks, right? So obviously we're not there yet, right? Like, I mean, companies like Tesla and Mercedes, they keep making a lot of progress. We're not level 5. But I think we all agree that it's not a question of like if anymore, it's more like a question of when, right? This is going to happen, right? So imagine the impact that self-driving trucks will have in supply chain, right? In terms of efficiency and cost savings, right? This is a huge aspect of the conversation now. Now, in terms of like also robotics in the context of warehouse automation, right? With the increased level of capabilities of things like IoT sensors and, you know, like mobile scanners and wireless telemetry, right? And you know, basically increased capabilities, right? In terms of like understanding what's happening in the warehouse, right? Like warehouse management systems, for example, right? All these capabilities are helping warehouse automation, right? To bring the digital and the physical aspects of process automation closer and closer together, right? To have like an easier and faster and cheaper way to bring warehouse automation to the next level, right? A good example of that is autonomous robots or AMRs, mobile robots, right? So, you know, leveraging these robots to take care of all the heavy lifting, right? All the hard tasks, so to speak, right? In warehouse management, and then focus humans, right? On more like the decision making process, right? Strategic decisions, right? In terms of the operational side of supply chain. Now, force number 4, environmental factors, right? Big aspect here, right? So think of like lean logistics, for example, right? And, you know, lean logistics has been one of the main or most active conversations, right? In terms of like how you can reduce waste, how can you boost efficiency in the supply chain, you know, how you empower your employees with technology and knowledge, how you have like more open feedback, how to improve the processes, right? So these are big questions, right? Then how you leverage technology to do that, right? I think we all realize, right, that, you know, in order to have like a greener supply chain, I mean, this is not an easy task at all. You're looking at, you know, leveraging a lot of different technologies from, you know, materializing efficiencies, but also, you know, training employees to perform their jobs the best they can in the most cost-efficient way possible, right? Risk management is also a big part in terms of environmental factors, right? So when it comes down to whether it's logistic risks or operational risks, right? You're looking at technologies such as process mining, right? To understand, for example, you know, where are these risks coming from and what's the best way to address them? What are the factors that are driving those risks in my process, in my business process, and what's the best way to address them proactively, not reactively, right? So that's another big aspect. Now, last but not least, IoT, right? Like core topic for this conference that we're all in. So IoT being defined oftentimes as the eyes and ears of supply chain, so very well positioned to make a huge impact, right? As we've seen it. So things like computer vision and inventory tracking capabilities. I think of computer vision as not just computer vision on its own, but this capability of taking computer vision feeds in combination with traditional IoT feeds, right? Like this sensor fusion concept that we see more and more often, right? For example, loss prevention in retail. It's a huge topic, right? And when you think of what needs to happen at a point of sale in, let's say, a Target or a Walmart, you have the kiosk, you have a camera, you have a scanner, you have an RFID mat, you have a scale, and all these readings, they have to be understood real time together in a split of a second to determine if there's an anomaly or not, right? Very, very powerful concepts, right, to identify anomalies and have a way to react in real time to those events. So with that, I wanna now present Panera's story. So Noel will be describing how they leveraging different technologies such as MDM to understand cross-domain relationships in their data, and basically how they leverage that understanding to find efficiencies in their supply chain, and also how they basically understood supply chain as part of their strategic roadmap. So with that, let's hear it directly from Noel. And yep. Oops. No.
Thanks, Jesus. I'm happy to be able to speak with you today about how we've been able to transform the TIBCO, meeting new challenges by having greater ability to manage the data underlying our business. At Panera Bread, our focus is on giving our customers good, real food that they love with a friendly touch that we call Panera Warmth. Whether you're in the business of food and beverage, retail, hospitality, or any other, the ability to adapt and manage constant change is crucial for success, whether those changes are customer tastes, market demands, or real-world events. In case you haven't heard of us, Panera Bread is a fast casual bakery cafe chain of more than 2,000 locations across North America. We focus on natural, real foods without artificial additives or preservatives, sandwiches, soups, salads, and we've even launched a line of flatbread pizzas that are delicious. Panera has experienced rapid growth over time, and it's because we led the industry in technical innovation with things such as mobile ordering, fast lane kiosks, and rapid pickup stations. The expansive My Panera loyalty program has tens of millions of customers, and we've also partnered with third-party delivery services nationwide. That rapid growth came with a lot of data challenges for our company. For a lot of our teams, we were heavily reliant on manual processes, spreadsheets, wiki pages, manual SQL scripts where we were updating data directly in production databases. What that led to is a lot of complexity and also a lot of risk. So with all those handoffs and all those manual processes, and you look at the extent of our menu, whether the variety of items that we offer around the country based on regional tastes, all of the pricing differences that exist because of different markets and the different price points that we offer items, nutritional data, municipal tax codes around the country, the data elements and the data points that we manage are well into the millions. And things are changing every day with new innovation.
And new changes and new items that we're testing. And so needless to say, that's a lot of data to keep up with. And so we partnered with TIBCO, and we've solved our data management challenges with using what we call the Panera Data Pantry. And we've built that on TIBCO's EBX platform. It's our master data management system, and it's now a critical function to all of the systems around Panera that require data about our cafes or our menu or our inventory items. And so we can focus on those things and we can quickly pivot because now we know that the data is in place. We have those integrations tightly built, and so that when things change in the marketplace, we can react very quickly. So one thing I do want to focus on based on the nature of this event is our supply chain. We have distribution centers of our own across the country, and we also rely on third-party distributors to get products to our cafes so that our managers can serve our customers. And with the situation last year with the pandemic, there were challenges to that supply chain process. And one of the things several things we had to do very quickly. We had to adapt to more outside, off-premise consumption of our items, whether that was through drive-through. We launched a curbside pickup channel, and more of our items were going out to customers through delivery channels as well, whether it was our delivery system or third-party aggregators. And so with that, we were able to turn those channels on because we knew where our menu data was, and we knew it was in good shape because of what we had done with the Panera Data Pantry. Another challenge we found was that our customers weren't able to get some basic staple foods from their grocery stores because of supply chain issues. And here we had these inventory items that we use to make our items, like blueberries or milk, and those kind of staples that people were in need of. So our leadership came up with the idea of Panera Grocery. And in less than 2 weeks, we were able to take those inventory items and relabel them, repackage them, and price them in a way that was affordable to our customers, and use our existing channels to get those grocery items to customers that needed them. So we're able to leverage our data in a way to unlock new business opportunities very quickly because of what we had done with TIBCO. So using our supply chain to our advantage, we're able to leverage all that data and adapt to those sudden business changes. Processes that otherwise would have taken weeks, we could do within days. And because of the innovation that we can now carry out, we're able to say yes to a lot more menu initiatives to our business. And IT as a entity is no longer in the way. We put the management of the data into the hands of the business owners, and we're able to implement changes to the menus and build a lot of more seamless processes, supporting even new locations spinning up a lot faster and not being the bottleneck within the IT department. Our data governance is also streamlined through the company. We use the workflow functionalities with EBX to make that possible, to keep our data quality high. And we also are able to use that data to provide our loyal customers with the quality food they expect. And while continuing to innovate on the menu side and continue to grow that customer base. And it's because of what we've done with TIBCO that helps make that possible. We look forward to future partnerships and continuing to innovate with TIBCO. And I want to thank you all for listening to me now, inviting me to share with you today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of this fantastic event. Jesus, back to you.
There's one line that I love in that story, right? Like, I don't know if you caught that, but in 2 weeks, basically, they were able to reinvent their business model, right? And make sure not to lose the investment that they had on inventory. That is just a great, great story. So really quickly, just to, some closing thoughts. Technology keeps being the propeller of progress in the world. There's no doubt about that, right? And as problems become more complex, right? Like the solutions, they need to be more and more creative. Always keeping innovation at the core of everything. So feel free to stop by. I'll have a table at the expo hall, and I would love to chat with all of you. So thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, Jesus. Fantastic stuff. All right, last slide of the evening before we head downstairs. For networking, great demonstrations. Again, I want to thank some of our sponsors for enabling what we've got today. But for those of you that are working on all the great prizes, giving out at All Things Open, I know that we've been waiting for the code for this session. So I'll give you just a moment to pull up your apps and get ready for that. The code for tonight is Spacewalk3. So all one word, Spacewalk, and then the number 3 at the end of that. So go ahead and punch that in. I'll repeat that again in a moment, but if you go out these doors, take a left, you're going to go down 3 escalators, and you'll be out, the food and beverages should be rolling out right now, actually, and please meet some people, help make introductions to folks that you might be able to help in your network, connect and make this All Things Open and Riot community even more powerful through your participation. So thank you again for your attention tonight, and I look forward to meeting some of you downstairs.